My hands trembled as my father's cruel words sliced through the air. Useless girl, never the bright one. Tears burned behind my eyes, my heart pounding against my ribs. After years of invisible sacrifice, the moment of reckoning had arrived. I gripped the car keys, my $15 million secret about to shatter their perfect family portrait forever. Their golden child wore bronze, and tonight at my brother's engagement party, everyone would finally see who truly built this family's fortune from shadows. 3 weeks earlier, the autumn sun cast golden rays through the tall windows of our family home in Greenwich, Connecticut. The living room buzzed with excitement as my brother Marcus stood beside Charlotte Whitfield, her diamond ring catching the light like a tiny star. My father Robert raised his champagne glass, his voice booming with pride that seemed to fill every corner of our colonial estate. To my son Marcus, the crown jewel of the family, he declared, his gray eyes shining with an admiration I had never seen directed my way. You've always been destined for greatness, and now you're joining with the Whitfield legacy. This is what success looks like. The room erupted in polite applause. Charlotte's parents, James and Diana Whitfield, smiled warmly from their position near the marble fireplace. They represented everything my father admired: old money, Wall Street power, and social connections that opened doors most people didn't even know existed. My mother Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief while my younger sister Emma captured everything on her phone. I stood near the back of the room holding my own champagne flute, watching the scene unfold like a movie where I was merely an extra. "Son, come here," my father commanded, reaching into his jacket pocket. He produced a worn leather box that I recognized immediately. Inside lay our grandfather's Rolex, a family heirloom that had been promised to the child who would carry the family name to new heights. Marcus accepted the watch with practiced humility, sliding it onto his wrist. "I won't let you down, Dad. The Morrison name means everything to me." "As it should," my father replied, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're the future of this family's legacy. Your work at Preston Consulting speaks for itself." I shifted my weight, the words I wanted to say burning in my throat. Earlier that week, I had been promoted to senior vice president at my investment firm, but the achievement felt hollow in this room where my successes were invisible. "Actually," I heard myself saying, surprised by my own voice cutting through the celebration, "I have some news too. I just received a promotion at work." The room fell quiet for a moment. My father's expression shifted, his smile tightening at the corners. "That's nice, Samantha. What is it now, Senior Vice President of Strategic Investments," I corrected quietly. He waved his hand dismissively, already turning back to Marcus. "Administrative work is administrative work regardless of the fancy title. It's not real achievement, not like what Marcus is doing. Consulting requires actual intelligent, strategic thinking." Charlotte's father, James, suddenly looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You know, I could swear I saw a familiar face in the Financial Times yesterday. There was an article about emerging leaders in investment banking. More champagne, anyone?" My mother interrupted, sensing the tension. The moment passed, but I caught James studying my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Later that evening, as the guests mingled in small groups, I retreated to my father's study to collect myself. The walls were lined with photos of Marcus's achievements: graduation from Yale, his first day at Preston Consulting, various awards and recognitions. There wasn't a single photo of me despite my Columbia MBA or my own professional milestones. My phone buzzed with an urgent email from my assistant. Another acquisition proposal needed my review, another multi-million-dollar decision that would wait for my analysis. I was about to respond when I heard voices in the hallway. "The models are brilliant, Marcus, simply brilliant. Where did you develop this framework?" The voice belonged to Harrison Sterling, one of Preston's senior partners who had arrived late to the celebration. "Oh, you know, just something I've been working on," Marcus replied smoothly. "I like to think outside conventional paradigms." My blood ran cold. I recognized the description. Those were my financial models, the ones I had spent months perfecting. Marcus had access to my home computer during his frequent visits, claiming he needed to check his email. I had been naive to trust him. "We're presenting these to the Steinberg Group next week," Harrison continued. "This could be the deal that makes your career." "I'm ready for it," Marcus assured him. "These strategies are my signature work." I stood frozen behind the study door, my hands clenched into fists. My own brother was stealing my intellectual property, claiming my innovations as his own. The golden child was wearing fool's gold, and I was the only one who knew it. As I slipped out through the study's other entrance, I passed by the kitchen where Charlotte was refreshing her lipstick. She caught my reflection in her compact mirror and turned. "Samantha, I've been meaning to talk to you," she said, her voice lower than usual. "My father seems quite interested in your career. He mentioned that Apex Capital just announced a new division head, someone young and brilliant. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that?" I kept my expression neutral. I hear things in the industry, but nothing specific. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. It's just interesting how the finance world can be so small sometimes. People think they know everyone important, and then someone emerges from the shadows and changes everything." As she walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor, I realized that my carefully constructed walls of anonymity might be developing cracks. The question was whether I could control the collapse or whether it would bury me beneath the rubble of my family's expectations. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations for Marcus and subtle dismissals of my presence. But as I drove home to my apartment in Manhattan, gripping the steering wheel of my modest Honda Civic while my Porsche sat hidden in my building's private garage, I made a decision. The golden child had been wearing bronze all along, and soon everyone would see the tarnish beneath the shine. 2 days after the engagement announcement, my phone rang at 5 in the morning. My mother's panicked voice cut through my sleep-foggy mind like a blade. "Samantha, you need to come home. Your father's called an emergency family meeting. The business is in trouble." I dressed quickly in one of my simpler outfits, the kind that wouldn't raise questions about how a mere administrative assistant could afford designer clothing. The drive to Connecticut felt longer than usual, my mind racing through possibilities. Morrison Manufacturing had been my father's pride for 30 years, building industrial components that kept America's infrastructure running. When I arrived, the tension in the house was palpable. My father sat at the dining room table, papers spread before him like evidence of a crime. His usually perfect silver hair was disheveled, his tie loosened. Marcus sat to his right, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. Emma had driven up from Yale, her young face creased with worry. "Sit," my father commanded without looking up. "We have a situation." I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, the position that had always felt more like exile than inclusion. "Morrison Manufacturing needs $2 million within the next 10 days, or we lose everything," he said bluntly. "A major client defaulted on payments, and our credit line is maxed out from the expansion last year." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Robert, how could this happen? You said the expansion was fully funded." "Markets change, Patricia," he snapped. "This is why women don't run businesses. Too emotional to understand calculated risks." I bit my tongue, knowing that pointing out the irony of his failed calculation would only make things worse. Marcus straightened his shoulders, adopting his consultant voice. "I have connections, Dad. Let me work my network. I'm sure I can find investors interested in a solid manufacturing play." "That's my boy." My father said, some hope returning to his voice. "This is why I invested in your education, your connections. You'll save us." Emma, still idealistic at 21, reached for her purse. "I have $8,000 in savings from my internships. It's not much, but—" "Keep your money, sweetheart," my father said gently, the softness he reserved only for his youngest. "This requires real capital, not pocket change." I watched this exchange, my mind already calculating. $2 million was significant, but not insurmountable. Not for someone in my position. But how could I help without revealing everything? "What about asking Uncle Richard?" my mother suggested. "Or the Weatherbys, we've known them for decades." "I won't go begging to family friends," my father growled. "A Morrison stands on his own feet." "A Morrison man, you mean?" I said quietly, unable to stop myself. His eyes snapped to mine, cold and dismissive. "What could you possibly contribute to this discussion, Samantha? Unless you've been hiding lottery winnings in your secretary's salary." Marcus smirked. "Maybe she could organize a bake sale." "I could help," I said simply. "If you'd let me look at the books, maybe I could find—" The laughter that erupted from my father was harsh and bitter. "What could you possibly do? Organize the bankruptcy files, color code, the liquidation documents. This requires financial sophistication, not filing skills." "Robert," my mother protested, but he waved her off. "No, Patricia, it's time she understood her limitations. Samantha, you've always had delusions about your capabilities. This is the real world where real money and real intelligence matter. You can't social media your way out of a financial crisis." I stood slowly, my decision crystallizing. "I understand, Father. I'll leave you to your real solutions." That night, alone in my Manhattan office that none of my family knew existed, I made a series of calls. By morning, $2 million would appear in Morrison Manufacturing's account, wired through a shell company I had established years ago for exactly this kind of situation. The paperwork would be clean, the source untraceable to me, and my father would never know his dismissed daughter had saved his legacy. As I authorized the transfer, my assistant knocked and entered with a stack of reports. "Ms. Morgan, the Steinberg acquisition is ready for your final review. Also, the Journal wants to schedule that interview about your innovative investment strategies. Push the interview to next month," I instructed, "and make sure the Morrison wire goes through by 6 a.m., listed as coming from Legacy Partners, LLC. She nodded and left. I stared out at the Manhattan skyline lights twinkling like stars I could actually reach. Somewhere in Connecticut, my father was probably pacing his study, wondering how to save his company. By tomorrow, he would have his miracle. The next morning, my phone exploded with texts from Emma. "You won't believe what happened," she wrote in all caps. "Someone saved the company." I called her back, feigning surprise as she breathlessly explained how my father had received a call from his bank. A company called Legacy Partners had wired exactly $2 million as an investment in Morrison Manufacturing, asking for minimal equity and favorable terms that bordered on charitable. "Dad's convinced Marcus made it happen," Emma said. "He's calling it the Marcus Miracle. Can you believe it?" I could, actually. It was exactly what I had expected. At the family dinner that weekend, my father was transformed. The weight had lifted from his shoulders and he radiated pride as he raised his glass to Marcus. "To my son, who proved that connections and intelligence can overcome any obstacle. You saved this family, Marcus. You're everything a father could hope for." Marcus accepted the praise with a modesty that made my stomach turn. He had the decency to avoid my eyes, perhaps sensing that I knew the truth about his fictional involvement. "It was nothing, Dad, just a few calls to the right people." "Don't be modest," my father insisted. "This is why I've always known you were the bright one. Problems arise and you solve them, unlike some people who can only offer empty promises and impossible dreams." The barb was clearly directed at me, but I had learned long ago that his arrows only hurt if I let them penetrate. I had saved his company even if he would never know it. That knowledge was armor enough. As dessert was served, my mother mentioned seeing my car in the financial district the previous week. "What were you doing there, dear?" Before I could answer, my father interjected. "Probably delivering documents for her boss. That's what administrative assistants do, Patricia. They run errands." I smiled and nodded, letting them believe what they wanted. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with notifications about another successful acquisition, another million added to my portfolio. The invisible daughter remained invisible, but her empire grew in the shadows. James Whitfield caught my eye across the table, that same speculative look from the engagement party. He had been quieter than usual during dinner, observing rather than participating. As the evening wound down, he cornered me in the hallway. "Legacy Partners," he said simply. "Interesting company. very selective about their investments. I maintained my innocent expression. I wouldn't know anything about that. Of course not. He agreed, but his smile suggested otherwise. It's just curious how they knew exactly what Morrison Manufacturing needed down to the penny, almost like someone with inside knowledge made that decision. Before I could respond, Charlotte appeared, linking her arm through her father's. Daddy, stop interrogating poor Samantha. She probably doesn't even know what investment firms do. The condescension in her voice should have stung, but I was too focused on James's knowing look to care. He might not have proof, but he had suspicions. The walls of my secret were developing more cracks, and I wondered how long before the truth came flooding through. The following Thursday, I found myself at La Bernardin, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, sitting across from the Whitfield family and trying to appear overwhelmed by the luxury. My father had insisted the whole family attend this dinner to properly celebrate the joining of our families, though I suspected it was more about impressing James Whitfield with the Morrison family unity. I still can't believe you got us a reservation here, my mother gushed to Diana Whitfield. Robert's been trying for months. Diana smiled graciously, her pearls catching the candlelight. James has his ways, don't you, darling? Throughout the appetizer course, I noticed Diana studying me with an intensity that made me shift in my seat. She had the look of someone trying to solve a puzzle pieces clicking together in her mind. Samantha, she said, suddenly causing everyone to turn toward me. Charlotte mentioned you work in the financial district. Which firm did you say you were with? Before I could answer, my father jumped in with his usual dismissiveness. She does some bookkeeping downtown, nothing impressive, basic data entry at a small firm. Marcus added his own condescension. She's still finding her way. Not everyone can land at a top-tier company right out of school. I see, Diana murmured, but her eyes never left my face. It's just that my nephew works at Apex Capital. He's been going on and on about their new chief investment officer. Apparently she's something of a prodigy. My hand stilled on my water glass for just a moment before I forced myself to take a casual sip. A female CIO, my father scoffed. That's progressive of them. I'm sure she's very good at whatever softer approach they're taking. James raised an eyebrow. Softer approach. Robert, this woman just orchestrated a $100 million merger. She's revolutionizing ethical investment strategies while delivering 30% returns. Must be quite something, I said carefully. I'd love to hear more about her strategies. Would you? Diana asked, her tone innocent, but her eyes sharp. My nephew says she's incredibly private, rarely does public appearances. Some say she operates under professional aliases to avoid the spotlight. My phone buzzed on the table. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen, which showed an urgent message from my CFO about the Tokyo market opening. I quickly flipped it face down, but not before Diana caught sight of something. Important message, she asked. Just my roommate. I lied smoothly. She locked herself out again. The conversation shifted to Marcus's wedding plans, but I could feel Diana's gaze returning to me throughout the meal. When the main course arrived, she steered the discussion back to business. You know, James has been trying to get a meeting with Apex's leadership for months, she mentioned casually. We're looking to partner on a sustainable technology initiative, but their CEO is notoriously selective about partnerships. Probably some nerdy recluse, Marcus joked. All numbers, no people skills. Charlotte laughed a bit too loudly at her fiancé's comment. Marcus, you're terrible. I'm sure she's brilliant. Brilliant doesn't mean personable, my father agreed. This is why men typically excel in these positions. We understand that business is about relationships, not just spreadsheets. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting copper. Diana's phone chimed. She glanced at it and her eyes widened slightly. Oh my, speaking of Apex Capital. She showed her screen to James, who leaned in with interest. Their newsletter just went out. Look at this quarter's performance. She began to read aloud, her voice carrying across our corner of the restaurant. Apex Capital closes unprecedented merger between Sustainable Solutions and Green Wave Technologies, creating the largest clean energy investment platform in North America. CEO S. Morgan, credited with visionary approach to ethical investing. S. Morgan, James repeated thoughtfully. Mysterious initials for a mysterious woman. My father waved dismissively. Probably Sarah or Susan. They always pick masculine-sounding names to be taken seriously. Desperate, if you ask me. The waiter appeared to clear our plates, and I excused myself to the restroom. In the gilt-framed mirror, I studied my reflection, seeing what Diana Whitfield saw. The same features that graced financial magazines, albeit with different styling. The same eyes that stared down boardrooms full of men who underestimated me. When I returned to the table, dessert had been served. Diana was regaling the table with a story about their recent charity gala, but she paused as I sat down. Samantha, dear, I don't suppose you have a business card. I like to collect contacts from everyone I meet. You never know when connections might be useful. My father laughed. Diana, she's a secretary. What would you need with... I'd be happy to share my card. I interrupted, reaching into my purse. I had 2 sets, one with my real information that I used in professional settings, and another with the administrative assistant cover I maintained for my family. I pulled out the latter, but as I handed it over, Diana gestured to my open purse. Is that another one? It looks different. Caught, I slowly withdrew my professional card, the one that read, S. Morgan, Chief Investment Officer, Apex Capital. Oh, that's just... I scrambled for an explanation. A sample card. My boss asked me to proofread the new executive cards for typos. How thorough of you, Diana said, plucking both cards from my hand before I could stop her. She studied them with interest before sliding them into her clutch. I'll keep both if you don't mind, for my collection. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of wedding talk and business posturing. My father continued to sing Marcus's praises while occasionally throwing verbal daggers in my direction. But Diana Whitfield had gone quiet, her earlier chattiness replaced by thoughtful observation. As we waited for the valet to bring our cars, she appeared at my elbow while the others were distracted. S. Morgan, she said quietly. Interesting coincidence. I met her gaze steadily. The world is full of coincidences. Indeed, it is. She smiled a cat who'd found the cream. You know, I pride myself on being an excellent judge of character. It served me well in this city where everyone wears masks. That must be a valuable skill. Oh, it is. For instance, I can tell when someone is far more than they appear to be, when they're playing a role for reasons I can only guess at. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Your secret is safe with me, dear, but I do wonder how long you intend to keep it from them. Before I could respond, she glided away to join her husband at their waiting Bentley. Charlotte waved goodbye to us all, her engagement ring sparkling under the restaurant's lights, while Marcus preened beside her like a peacock. What were you and Diana discussing? My mother asked as we walked to our own car. Nothing important, I replied. She was just being polite. My father snorted. Waste of her time. Diana Whitfield doesn't make small talk without purpose. She was probably trying to figure out if you were single, maybe set you up with one of their lesser acquaintances. God knows you need the help. As I drove back to Manhattan alone, having declined my parents' offer to stay over, I couldn't shake Diana's words. She knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough to be dangerous. The question was what she intended to do with that knowledge. My phone rang through the car's speaker. My CFO's voice filled the space. Boss, we need your sign-off on the Tokyo deal. Also, the Times wants to bump up that feature to next week. Tell them no, I said firmly. We stick to the original schedule. You sure they're saying it's tied to the Apex quarterly report? The buzz is building. Let it build, I replied, but on our timeline, not theirs. As the city lights blurred past my windows, I thought about Diana's knowing smile and James's persistent interest. The Whitfields were players in this game, whether I'd invited them or not. But every good strategist knows that sometimes the best move is to let your opponents think they're winning. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I glanced at it while stopped at a red light. Your professional card is impressive. Your personal story, I suspect, is even more so. When you're ready to stop hiding, I'd like to hear it. DW. I deleted the message and drove on. The walls were crumbling faster now, but I still controlled the timing of the demolition, or at least I hoped I did. My father's 60th birthday party was orchestrated with the kind of precision usually reserved for state dinners. My mother had transformed the country club's ballroom into what she called an elegant celebration of success, though it felt more like a shrine to Marcus's accomplishments. Ice sculptures spelled out Morrison Legacy, while photos of my father through the years lined the walls. Notably, most featured him with Marcus at Yale graduation, at Preston Consulting, at various business achievements. The few that included me showed a young girl in the background, out of focus, as if the camera itself knew I didn't belong in the narrative. I arrived deliberately late wearing a modest black dress that screamed underpaid assistant, rather than the designer gown hanging in my real closet. The room was already filled with my father's business associates, their wives glittering with jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. Samantha. My mother rushed over, stress evident in her voice. "Where have you been? Marcus is about to give his speech." Of course he was. I took my assigned seat at table 3, notable for being just far enough from the main table to emphasize my peripheral status. Emma sat beside me, looking uncomfortable in her formal dress. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. "It's Dad's birthday, but it feels like Marcus's coronation." Before I could respond, the lights dimmed and my brother took the microphone. He looked every inch the successful consultant, his Tom Ford suit impeccable, the stolen Rolex gleaming on his wrist. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to celebrate a giant of industry, a master of business, and most importantly, my inspiration, my father, Robert Morrison." Applause rippled through the room. I sipped my water, needing something to do with my hands. "Everything I am I owe to this man." Marcus continued, his voice carrying that false modesty he'd perfected. He taught me that excellence isn't just expected in the Morrison family, it's mandatory, and I hope I've lived up to that standard. "Hear, hear." Someone called out, probably Henderson from the club. My father stood basking in the attention. When Marcus finished, they embraced, and my father took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight. 60 years on this earth, and I can say with certainty that a man's greatest achievement is his legacy. And looking at my son, Marcus, I know the Morrison name is in capable hands." He paused, surveying the room with satisfaction. "You know, people often ask me the secret to raising successful children. The answer is simple. Recognize excellence and nurture it. Not everyone can be exceptional. That's what makes it exceptional. But when you see that spark, that potential for greatness, you invest everything in it." Several people nodded approvingly. I felt Emma's hand find mine under the table. "Marcus has that spark. From the day he was born, I knew he would carry our family name to heights I could only dream of. His work at Preston, his brilliant strategies, his recent engagement to Charlotte, every choice reflects the Morrison standard of excellence." Harold Fitzgerald, one of my father's oldest business partners, raised his glass. "What about your daughters, Robert? Surely they've inherited some of that Morrison drive." My father's smile tightened imperceptibly. "Emma is still in school, finding her path. And Samantha, well, not everyone can be exceptional. She keeps busy with her little job downtown. Administrative work suits her capabilities." The dismissal was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that several people actually nodded, as if this made perfect sense. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but maintained my placid expression. "Now, let's talk about the future." My father continued, smoothly changing the subject. "Marcus has some exciting news about Preston's latest acquisition." I quietly excused myself, Emma's sympathetic squeeze on my hand telling me she understood. In the bathroom, I leaned against the marble counter and tried to breathe through the familiar ache of invisibility. My phone vibrated urgently. 3 missed calls from my CFO and a text marked urgent. "Tokyo deal hit a snag. Need your decision now. Could lose everything if we don't act in next hour." I locked myself in a stall and called him back, keeping my voice low. "Talk to me." Yamamoto's getting cold feet, says he needs assurance from the top that we're committed to the 5-year sustainability plan. He wants to hear it from you directly, or he walks. Conference call. Video, he insists, says he needs to see your face read your commitment. I checked my watch. The party had at least 2 more hours, but this deal was worth $80 million and would secure clean energy jobs for thousands. Set it up, I'll find somewhere private. I slipped out of the bathroom and navigated the service corridors I'd mapped during countless childhood events here. The club's administrative office was empty, the staff all busy with the party. I locked the door, pulled my laptop from my bag, and transformed. Off came the modest dress replaced by the blazer I always carried. My hair went up in the power bun I wore for boardrooms. When Yamamoto's face appeared on screen, I was S. Morgan, the woman who moved millions with a nod. The negotiation was delicate, requiring every ounce of my skill. Yamamoto pushed on terms tested. My resolve demanded concessions. I gave ground where I could, held firm where I must. 45 minutes later, we had a deal. Morgan-san Yamamoto said, as we concluded, "It is refreshing to work with someone who understands that profit and principle need not be enemies." That's the foundation of everything Apex stands for, I assured him. Our signatures on this deal are promises to the future. After we disconnected, I sat in the dark office letting the adrenaline fade. $80 million, thousands of jobs, a breakthrough in sustainable technology. I had just changed lives across 2 continents, and my father was probably still regaling guests with stories of Marcus's mediocrity disguised as excellence. When I returned to the party now, back in my modest dress with my CEO persona locked away, I found chaos at the main table. Henderson and Phillips, 2 of my father's major business partners, were in animated discussion with him. "Robert, be reasonable," Henderson was saying. "This anonymous investor who saved your company, we've done some digging." And, my father asked, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "The money came from Apex Capital's discretionary fund," Phillips announced. "The same firm that's been making waves all over the financial sector. Their CEO is going to be at tomorrow's Finance Leaders Summit." "So," Marcus interjected, but I heard the nervousness in his voice. So Henderson continued, "Whoever made that investment decision knows your business inside out. They knew exactly what you needed when you needed it, and they structured terms that no rational investor would offer unless they had personal interest." "Are you suggesting someone at Apex has been spying on us?" my father asked, indignation rising. "I'm suggesting," Henderson said carefully, "that you might have a guardian angel you don't know about, and tomorrow we might finally meet them." Diana Whitfield, who had been quietly observing from nearby, chose that moment to approach. "The summit should be fascinating. I hear they're planning quite the reveal." She caught my eye and winked so subtly that no one else noticed. My father raised his voice to address the table. "Whatever the case, I'm sure it was Marcus's connection that made it happen. These financial types all know each other." "Of course," Henderson agreed, but his expression remained skeptical. "Though I must say, Robert, your family seems to be full of surprises lately. Did you know your secretary daughter was spotted in the executive elevator at Apex last week?" Every head turned toward me. My mind raced for an explanation. "I was delivering documents," I said calmly. "The regular mailroom was backed up, so they sent me directly." "Delivering documents to the 40th floor," Phillips pressed. "That's the executive suite." "I go where they tell me," I replied with a self-deprecating shrug. "I don't ask questions above my pay grade." My father laughed, the tension breaking. "That's my Samantha, always in the right place at the wrong time. Or is it the wrong place at the right time? I can never remember with her." The conversation moved on, but I noticed Henderson and Phillips exchanging glances. Diana continued to watch me with that knowing smile. The walls weren't just cracking now, they were starting to crumble. As the party wound down, my father gave one final toast. To family, to legacy, and to knowing your place in the world. Marcus knows his at the top, and that's what makes him exceptional. I raised my glass with everyone else, the taste of champagne bitter on my tongue. Tomorrow, the Finance Leaders Summit would change everything. The question was whether I was ready for the debris when the walls finally fell. Emma found me as I was leaving. "That was brutal," she said quietly. "The way Dad just dismisses you, like you don't even exist." "I exist," I told her, squeezing her shoulder, "just not in the way he expects." "What does that mean?" I smiled sadly. "You'll understand soon enough. Everyone will." As I drove home, my phone lit up with messages about the Tokyo deal's success, about tomorrow's summit, about the journal article being moved up. The invisible daughter was about to become very visible indeed. But first I had one more night in the shadows, one more night of being nobody, before the world discovered I had been somebody all along. The morning after the birthday debacle, my sister appeared at my Manhattan apartment unannounced. I'd given her a key months ago for emergencies, but this was the first time she'd used it. I found her in my living room staring at the wall where I'd carelessly left a framed magazine cover, partially visible behind a plant. "Samantha," she said without turning around, "we need to talk." I set down my coffee carefully, my mind calculating exits from this conversation. "Emma, what are you doing here? Don't you have classes?" She spun to face me, her eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and amazement. I skipped them. "After last night, after years of watching Dad treat you like furniture, I needed to understand why you just take it." "Emma." "So I came here." She continued gesturing around my apartment. "To your modest place that you always made sound like a studio in Queens. This is a 3-bedroom apartment in Tribeca, Sam. The doorman called you Ms. Morgan and asked about your Porsche in the garage." My shoulders sagged. Of all the ways I'd imagined this unraveling Emma discovering the truth hadn't been high on my list. "How much do you pay for this place?" she pressed. "Because I looked it up. These units start at $10,000 a month." "The real estate market is complicated," I said weakly. "Stop." She walked to my home office, which I'd foolishly left unlocked. "I've been in here for an hour. I've seen things, Sam. Expensive things. Hidden things." I followed her into the room where my carefully separated life lay exposed. Designer suits hung in the open closet where I'd been selecting options for tomorrow's summit. A stack of financial journals sat on my desk, several featuring profiles of S. Morgan, with photos that were obviously me, despite different styling. Award plaques from various financial institutions lined a shelf I'd meant to relocate to my real office. Emma picked up one of the plaques, reading aloud, "Excellence in Sustainable Investment Strategy, presented to S. Morgan Chief Investment Officer, Apex Capital." She set it down with shaking hands. "You're S. Morgan. The S. Morgan. The one everyone in my finance classes talks about like some kind of legend." I sank into my desk chair. "Emma, you can't tell anyone." "Tell anyone?" Her voice cracked. "Sam, you just orchestrated a $100 million merger. You're running one of the most successful investment firms in the country. And last night, Dad called you a secretary who isn't bright enough to understand real business." "That's exactly why no one can know," I said urgently. "Not yet." "How long?" she asked. "How long have you been living this double life?" 5 years, give or take, since I left Columbia." She grabbed a Wall Street Journal from my desk, the one with my shadowed profile on the cover. "This article calls you the mystery mogul. It says you've turned down every interview, every photo opportunity. I thought it was because you were some reclusive genius. But it's because of Dad, isn't it?" I couldn't deny it. At first I told myself I was building something on my own terms without the Morrison name opening doors. But then, I don't know. It became easier to let him think I was failing than to watch him diminish my success. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "All those times he compared you to Marcus, said you weren't exceptional, that you'd never amount to anything. While I was building an empire 6 blocks from his office, I finished. The $2 million, she said suddenly, the pieces clicking together. Legacy partners, that was you." I nodded. "You saved Dad's company while he was calling you useless." She laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. And Marcus took credit for it. Marcus takes credit for a lot of things, I said carefully. Her eyes sharpened. What does that mean? I hesitated, then pulled out my laptop. If I was revealing truths, I might as well reveal them all. I showed her the digital trail I'd been tracking every model Marcus had stolen, every strategy he'd claimed, every innovation that had originated on my computer before appearing in his Preston presentations. He's been hacking my systems for 2 years, I explained. I caught him 6 months ago, but decided to let him continue. Why would you do that? Because I started feeding him specific information. Each stolen model has my digital signature embedded in the code. Invisible, unless you know where to look, but legally traceable. It's like he's been signing my name to every fraudulent claim. Emma stared at the evidence, her face cycling through shock, anger, and something like grief. Our whole family is built on lies. Dad's pride in his son is based on stolen work. Marcus's engagement is based on a fictional success story, and you've been pretending to be nobody when you're somebody incredible. It's not that simple, I said. Isn't it? She pulled out her phone, showing me an email. I got into Harvard Business School last week, full scholarship, early admission to their accelerated program. Emma, that's wonderful. Is it? She tossed the phone aside. I was going to tell everyone at Dad's party, but then I watched him dismiss you again, praise Marcus again, and I realized something. If I tell him, he'll either credit Marcus for inspiring me or diminish it somehow. There's no winning. So you didn't tell them? No. And now I'm wondering if I should follow your playbook. Accept the scholarship, but tell Dad I'm taking a gap year. Build something amazing while he thinks I'm finding myself. Emma, no, I said firmly. My way isn't healthy. Living split between two identities, hiding your achievements, letting family think you're a failure, it eats at you. Then why do it? I considered the question, one I'd asked myself countless times. At first it was pride, then spite. Now I think I'm afraid that even with all this success, he still won't see me as exceptional, that he'll find a way to make it small. Emma pulled out a thick envelope from her bag. Well, you might not have a choice much longer. I recognized the Wall Street Journal's letterhead. What is this? I intercepted it from your building's mail. They're not just writing about S. Morgan anymore. They've connected the dots. They have photos of you entering Apex's building testimonies from people who've worked with S. Morgan, describing someone who looks exactly like Robert Morrison's daughter. They're planning to publish the full expose next week. My stomach dropped. How did they? Does it matter? The real question is what you're going to do about it. She pulled out another paper. Also, this came by courier while I was here. It's marked urgent. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was from the Finance Leaders Summit Organizing Committee confirming my keynote speech tomorrow night and noting that, due to unprecedented interest, we've arranged for live broadcast coverage of the reveal of Apex Capital's leadership. They're turning your presentation into a media event, Emma said. No more shadows to hide in. I walked to my window, looking out at the city I'd quietly conquered. I knew this day would come. I just thought I'd have more control over when and how. Emma joined me, her reflection younger, but showing the same Morrison determination. You still have control. The summit is tomorrow night, right same night as Marcus's rescheduled engagement party. They moved it to tomorrow. Charlotte's mother insisted, said something about the original date conflicting with something more important. She gave me a meaningful look. I wonder what Diana Whitfield knows that we don't. I thought about Diana's knowing smiles, her careful questions, her collection of my business cards. Probably more than she should. So what's the plan? You can't be in two places at once. Can I mused. The party starts at 6. The summit keynote is at 8. They're 20 minutes apart. You're going to try to attend both, Sam. That's insane. Maybe. Or maybe it's the perfect way to control the narrative. Show up at the party as the daughter they expect, then reveal the truth on live television while they're still celebrating Marcus's fictional success. Emma studied me with new respect. That's brilliantly ruthless. I learned from the best. I said, thinking of all the times my father had orchestrated public humiliations for those he deemed unworthy. The only difference is my reveal will be built on truth, not lies. What about Marcus? When this comes out, his plagiarism will be exposed. He'll be ruined. I felt a pang of sympathy that surprised me. He made his choices. I tried to warn him indirectly, even left obvious trails he could have noticed if he'd been paying attention. He chose to keep stealing. And Dad, that was harder to answer. He'll either be proud that a Morrison achieved something remarkable, or he'll be furious that I succeeded without his approval. Either way, he'll finally see me. Emma hugged me suddenly fiercely. I see you. I've always seen you, and I'm proud of you even if Dad never says it. We spent the rest of the day in my apartment, Emma asking questions about my journey, about the deals I'd made, about the people I'd helped. She was particularly interested in my sustainable investment strategies. So, you're not just making money, she said. You're changing how money gets made. That's the goal. Profit with purpose. Dad would call it soft, but my returns speak for themselves. As evening approached, Emma prepared to leave. What should I do about Harvard? Go, I advised. But go as yourself. Don't hide your light because someone else can't see it. Learn from my mistakes. Will you tell them tomorrow night? One way or another, the truth comes out tomorrow. Whether I tell them or the journal does the masquerade ends. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think you're the brightest star in our family. You always have been. Dad just needed better glasses. After she left, I stood in my office surrounded by the evidence of my achievements. Tomorrow, S. Morgan and Samantha Morrison would become one person in the public eye. The question was whether my family would celebrate the revelation or mourn the illusion. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana Whitfield. Looking forward to tomorrow night. Both events should be quite memorable. I smiled grimly. She had no idea how memorable they were about to become. Charlotte Whitfield's choice of restaurant for our lunch was telling Serafina a power lunch spot where Wall Street executives brokered deals over designer salads. Not the kind of place you'd invite your future sister-in-law for casual girl talk. She was already seated when I arrived, her Hermes bag occupying its own chair like a six-figure chaperone. Her smile was different from the polished one she wore around Marcus, sharper, more calculating. Samantha's so good of you to come, she said, air-kissing me with precision that avoided actual contact. I thought it was time we got to know each other better. After all, we're about to be family. I settled into my chair, noting how she'd positioned us at a corner table with clear sightlines to the entire restaurant. Strategic. That's thoughtful of you, Charlotte. How are the wedding plans coming? Oh, you know the usual chaos. She waved dismissively, her engagement ring catching the light. Though we've had to make some adjustments. The venue availability, family, scheduling conflicts, these things happen. Of course. I kept my tone neutral, wondering where this was heading. The waiter appeared and we ordered. Charlotte waited until he was gone before leaning forward, her perfectly manicured nails drumming once on the table. I'm going to be direct with you, Samantha. I think we're both too smart for games. I wasn't aware we were playing any. Weren't we? She pulled out her phone, swiping to a document. My father has been trying to get a meeting with Apex Capital's CEO for 6 months. Do you know how rare it is for James Whitfield to chase anyone? Your father is very persistent when he sees value in something. Exactly. And he sees enormous value in Apex. So much so that he's done extensive research. She turned the phone toward me, including having our investigator look into every employee at the firm. On the screen was a staff directory for Apex, but with additional notations. Next to S. Morgan's entry, someone had written, "Physical description matches R. Morrison's eldest daughter. Verify." I maintained my composure. That's quite invasive. It's business. Charlotte's smile was predatory now. But here's what's really interesting. My father's investigator also looked into Marcus's recent success at Preston. The innovative financial models he's been presenting, they have certain characteristics. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression blank. Marcus is very talented. Is he... Charlotte pulled up another document. Because our tech specialist analyzed the code underlying his most praised strategies. There are embedded signatures like a digital watermark. They all trace back to the same source. She let that hang in the air between us while our salads arrived. We both ignored the food. The signatures spell out variations of SM and Morgan, she continued, hidden in the methodology invisible unless you know exactly where to look. Almost like someone wanted credit but was too patient to claim it immediately. That's a fascinating theory. It's more than a theory. Her voice dropped lower. I know Marcus has been stealing from you. I know you're S. Morgan, and I know you've been playing a very long game. I set down my water glass carefully. Those are serious accusations. They're not accusations. They're facts. The question is what I do with them. And what do you intend to do? Charlotte laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know, when I first met Marcus, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Handsome, successful, from a good family, everything a Whitfield bride should want. But then little things started not adding up. His explanations for his strategies were surface level. He couldn't answer deeper questions about his own work. And when I surprised him at his office last month, I found him accessing systems he shouldn't have been in. She pulled up a photo on her phone. Marcus at his desk, clearly visible on his screen, was my personal server login page. He doesn't know I have this, she said, just like he doesn't know I've been documenting every inconsistency, every lie, every stolen idea. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to understand. She leaned back, studying me with genuine curiosity. You're brilliant enough to run a major investment firm to save your father's company, to revolutionize sustainable investing, yet you let your family treat you like you're worthless. Why? It was the same question Emma had asked, the same question I'd asked myself 1,000 times. Sometimes the cost of being seen is higher than the pain of being invisible. But that's changing, isn't it? The summit tomorrow night, you're finally going to reveal yourself. How do you... Please, my mother has her sources. She's known who you were since that first dinner. She's been dropping hints to your father for weeks, watching him dismiss every clue. She finds it fascinating, like watching someone insist the sky isn't blue while standing under it. And you, what do you find it? Charlotte's expression shifted, vulnerability cracking through her composed facade. I find it terrifying. I've built my entire engagement on a lie. I'm about to marry a man who's built his career on fraud. My family's reputation will be destroyed when this comes out. Then why not break it off now quietly? Because I want more than quiet. Her eyes hardened again. I want justice. Marcus didn't just steal from you, he stole from me too. My trust, my future, my family's good name. He made me complicit in his fiction. So what do you propose? Tomorrow night, the summit and the engagement party. They're deliberately scheduled to conflict, aren't they? I didn't confirm or deny, but she took my silence as agreement. I want to be there when it happens, she continued. When the truth comes out. I want to watch his face when he realizes everyone knows what he really is. And then I want to publicly break our engagement in front of everyone who matters. That's dramatic. That's justice. She finally took a bite of her salad. Your father always talks about the Morrison legacy. Well, let's see which child actually built one. This could destroy Marcus's career permanently. He destroyed it himself the moment he logged into your system. Charlotte's voice was ice. I'm just ensuring he faces consequences. Unless you're planning to protect him... No, I said quietly. I'm done protecting people who wouldn't protect me. Good. She raised her water glass in a mock toast. To tomorrow night, then. To truth and consequences. We finished lunch with lighter conversation, but the weight of what was coming sat between us like a third party. As we prepared to leave, Charlotte had one more revelation. Oh, I should mention, I've invited several financial journalists to the engagement party, told them there would be a major announcement about the Morrison-Whitfield union. They think it's about a business merger. Charlotte, they'll want to cover both events, of course, the summit and the party. Imagine their delight when they realize the two biggest stories of the night are actually one story. She smiled sweetly. Wear something memorable, Samantha. You'll be photographed a lot. After she left, I sat in my car for a long moment processing the conversation. Charlotte wasn't just a scorned fiancée, she was a strategic player who'd been planning her own endgame. The chessboard was getting crowded, and tomorrow night all the pieces would collide. My phone rang. Diana Whitfield. Samantha, dear, Charlotte just told me about your lunch. I wanted you to know that the Whitfield family stands ready to support you in whatever comes next. We value authenticity and brilliance. Marcus has neither. Mrs. Whitfield, Diana, please. And Samantha, your father is a fool. But even fools can learn. The question is whether he'll learn in time to salvage any relationship with his remarkable daughter. She hung up before I could respond. As I drove back to my office, I realized the revelation I'd planned as a controlled disclosure was becoming something larger. Charlotte wanted revenge. Diana wanted vindication. Emma wanted justice. The financial media wanted a story. And somewhere in Connecticut, my father was polishing his speech for tomorrow's engagement party, still believing his golden child was everything he'd hoped for. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd spent my entire life orchestrating my invisibility. Tomorrow night, the whole world would see me at once. The question was whether he'd finally see me too, or whether he'd close his eyes to preserve the illusion he preferred. My assistant knocked and entered my office. Ms. Morgan, the summit organizers called. They've had to move to a larger venue due to demand. Also, the Journal wants to confirm you'll be available for questions after your keynote. Tell them yes, I decided, to all of it. Tomorrow night, I would stop being two people. The only question was which person would survive the merger. The pounding on my apartment door at 11 p.m. could only be Marcus. He had a way of making even knocking sound entitled as if the door owed him entry. I'd been expecting this visit since Charlotte had shown her cards at lunch. Open up, Samantha, I know you're in there. I took my time walking to the door, checking the security monitor first. He looked disheveled, his usually perfect hair mussed his designer shirt untucked. This was Marcus in panic mode, a rare sight. When I opened the door, he pushed past me without invitation, his eyes wild as he took in my apartment properly for the first time. This place... He spun around, cataloging the obvious wealth. How long have you been lying to everyone? Says the man who's been stealing from me for 2 years, I replied calmly, closing the door. His face went white, then red. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? I walked to my laptop, pulling up the comprehensive file I'd compiled. Preston Consulting's Project Meridian, my algorithm. The Steinberg Group presentation, my market analysis. The innovative risk assessment model that got you promoted mine. Should I continue? You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. I showed him the screen. Every model you stole has my digital signature embedded in the code. SM 2022 A1 through SM 2024 X47. 47 instances of theft Marcus. All traceable, all documented. He sank onto my couch, his bravado crumbling. How did you know? I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Apex Capital Marcus. Did you really think I wouldn't notice someone accessing my home system? I've been monitoring you since your third breach. Chief Investment... His voice trailed off as the pieces clicked. You're S. Morgan, the anonymous investor, the one who saved Dad's company. Among other things. But that's impossible. You're... The daughter Dad said would never be bright, the one he called useless last night while celebrating your stolen success. I sat across from him, maintaining steady eye contact. Yes, that's me. Marcus's hands clenched and unclenched. If you knew I was stealing, why didn't you stop me? Because I was curious how far you'd go, and because every theft created evidence. You've been building my case for me one stolen model at a time. I'll delete everything. I'll come clean to Preston, resign quietly. It's too late for that. I pulled up Charlotte's photos. Your fiancé knows. She has evidence of you accessing my systems. She's planning to expose you tomorrow night. The color drained from his face completely. Charlotte knows. She's known for weeks. She hired investigators, Marcus. Real ones, not the kind you pretend to be when you're stealing my work. He stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. This will ruin me. My career, my reputation, everything I've built. Everything you stole, I corrected. There's a difference. You don't understand. He whirled to face me, desperation replacing anger. Do you know what it's like being Robert Morrison's son? The expectations, the pressure. Every day he reminds me I'm supposed to be exceptional, the bright one, the legacy. And I'm the one he called dim, so what? So I had to deliver. When I started at Preston, they expected brilliance because I was a Morrison. But I'm not brilliant, Sam. I'm adequate at best. I can talk the talk, wear the right suits, schmooze the right people. But when it came to actual innovation, he collapsed back onto the couch. I was drowning. So you decided to drown me instead? I didn't plan it. That first time, I just needed one model to get through a presentation. But it worked so well and you never said anything, so I kept going. Each time I told myself it would be the last. But it never was. No. His voice was hollow. Because the more I succeeded with your work, the higher the expectations grew. Dad would call so proud talking about how I was proving the Morrison genes, how I was everything he'd hoped for, how I wasn't like me. He couldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry. Are you just sorry you got caught? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Both probably. I know what I did was wrong. But Sam, if this comes out tomorrow, it won't just destroy me. It'll destroy Dad, his whole worldview, his pride in the family, name his belief in his own judgment. His judgment that I'm worthless and you're exceptional. Yes, the admission hung between us. He's built his entire identity around being right about us, about which child deserved investment and which one didn't. I stood walking to my window. The city sparkled below, indifferent to our family drama. He made his choice a long time ago, Marcus. So did you. We could fix this, he said desperately. You could license your models to me officially, retroactively, make it a partnership. No one has to know about the theft. Everyone already knows. Charlotte, her parents, Emma the Journal. Emma knows, he seemed to shrink further. She figured it out this morning. Apparently I'm not as good at hiding success as I thought. What did she say? She said she got into Harvard but isn't telling Dad because she's afraid he'll credit you for inspiring her. Marcus flinched as if I'd slapped him. I never wanted... Yes, you did. You wanted the glory, the praise, the position as golden child. You got it all. It just came with a price you didn't expect to pay. So what happens now? Are you going to have me arrested? I turned from the window. No, what you did was unethical, but I permitted it to continue. That complicates legal action. Besides, I don't need the courts to deliver justice. Then what? Tomorrow night, I reveal who S. Morgan is at the summit. Your theft will be exposed as part of that story because it's all connected. You can choose how to handle that exposure. What are my options? Come clean before I speak. Tell Preston yourself. Resign with whatever dignity you can salvage. Or wait for the public revelation and deal with the consequences. Either way, your career built on my work ends tomorrow. And Charlotte has her own plans for you. I'd prepare for a very public breakup. Marcus stood slowly, looking older than his 28 years. I suppose I deserve all of it. You do. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, your work is brilliant. Every model, every strategy I understood, maybe half of it on my best days. You really are the bright one. Dad just couldn't see it. He'll see it tomorrow. Yeah. Marcus gave a bitter laugh. We'll all see it tomorrow. The daughter he dismissed conquering Wall Street while the son he celebrated was a fraud. It's almost Shakespearean. Shakespeare's tragedies usually end with everyone dead. Just careers and egos in our version. He met my eyes one last time. I know I have no right to ask, but could you maybe not mention the theft in your keynote? Let me fall on my sword privately? I considered this. If you come clean to Preston before 6 p.m. tomorrow, I won't mention you by name. But Marcus, if you try to run or hide from this, if you let Dad continue believing his fiction at that party, I'll expose every detail. Fair enough. He opened the door, then looked back. Sam, you could have been this successful without hiding. Dad would have been proud. No, I said with certainty. He would have found a way to make it small, to credit it to luck or connections or anything but my own brilliance. This way I built something undeniable. Undeniable, he repeated. I guess that's the difference between us. You built something real while I constructed an elaborate lie. After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my office surrounded by the achievements my father had never seen. Tomorrow, the hiding would end. Marcus would face his reckoning. Charlotte would have her revenge, and I would finally step fully into the light. But tonight I sat with the weight of my brother's confession. He was a thief and a fraud, but he was also a son, crushed by expectations he couldn't meet. In trying to be what our father demanded, he'd lost any chance to discover who he might have been. I thought about Emma's question, why had I hidden for so long? The answer was more complex than pride or spite. It was about building something that couldn't be diminished, creating a success too large to be made small by someone else's limited vision. Tomorrow, Robert Morrison would learn that both his children had been lying to him. One had pretended to be more than he was, while the other had pretended to be less. The question was, which deception would hurt him more? My phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte. Marcus just called me crying. Thank you for the warning shot. Everything is in place for tomorrow. Wear Reddit photographs better for magazine covers. I smiled grimly and went to my closet. Reddit would be the color of power, of passion, and perhaps most fittingly, of blood. Tomorrow, the Morrison family mythology would bleed out in public, and from its remains, the truth would finally emerge. Thursday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth for October, as if the weather itself anticipated the heat of revelation. I was reviewing my keynote presentation when my assistant announced visitors in the lobby. James Whitfield is here, Ms. Morgan. He's with Robert Morrison. My stomach tightened. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. Send them up. I quickly transformed my office, hiding the most obvious signs of my identity, while leaving enough to intrigue. When they entered, my father looked annoyed at being dragged to what he clearly considered a waste of time. Samantha. He stared at me behind the executive desk. What are you doing here? I thought we were meeting you at some administrative office. This is my office, Dad. James Whitfield smoothly intervened. Robert, I apologize for the deception, but I needed you to see this for yourself. He turned to me with a knowing smile. Ms. Morrison, or should I say Ms. Morgan, thank you for accommodating us. My father's face went through several expressions before settling on condescension. Is this some kind of joke, Samantha? If you're trying to impress Mr. Whitfield by borrowing your boss's office... Robert James interrupted, pulling out an elegant invitation. I'm here on behalf of the Finance Leaders Summit. We'd like to personally invite your family to attend tomorrow evening's keynote address. I appreciate the gesture, James, but tomorrow is Marcus's engagement party. You know this. I do, which is why I'm being very specific. James set the invitation on my desk, his eyes never leaving mine. We want all of Robert Morrison's accomplished children in attendance. The summit organizers believe it would be educational. My father scoffed. Accomplished children, you mean Marcus, though I appreciate you including the girls out of politeness. Do I? James pulled out his phone, scrolling to an article. Tell me, Robert, have you been following the news about Apex Capital's mysterious CEO? The woman who won't show her face, Charlotte mentioned her. Probably some diversity hire trying to make a splash before flaming out. I gripped my pen tighter but maintained my composure. Interesting perspective, James continued. This diversity hire has generated $700 million in sustainable investments this year alone. She saved Morrison Manufacturing with a strategic investment that no traditional firm would have made. My father shifted uncomfortably. What does this have to do with everything? James set his phone on my desk, the screen showing a side-by-side comparison of public photos. One showed S. Morgan in shadow at a financial conference. The other was me at last year's family Christmas pulled from Emma's Instagram. The summit's keynote speaker tomorrow night will finally reveal her identity. The financial world is buzzing with speculation. And you think my family should attend because I believe in supporting all accomplished members of the Morrison family. James's emphasis was subtle but clear. And because the keynote begins at 8, which gives everyone time to make an appearance at the engagement party first. My father stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Samantha, tell Mr. Whitfield that you can't attend because you'll be at your brother's engagement party. Family comes first. I met his eyes steadily. I'll be at both events, Dad. Both? He laughed. How do you plan to manage that they're across town from each other? I have my ways. James stood as well, but his movements were unhurried. Robert, humor me. Bring your whole family to the summit after the party. If nothing else, it will be educational to see what real success looks like in today's market. Marcus shows us that every day. Does he? James's smile was sharp. I've been trying to verify some of his recent innovations at Preston, curious how similar they are to Apex Capital's proprietary strategies, almost as if they came from the same source. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. My father's face flushed. Are you implying my son is anything less than brilliant? I'm implying nothing. I'm simply observing patterns. James turned to me. Ms. Morrison, I look forward to your presentation tomorrow. I understand you'll be discussing the importance of authentic achievement in financial leadership. After he left, my father remained standing, studying me with new suspicion. What was that about? James Whitfield likes to see connections where none exist, I said carefully. Don't lie to me, Samantha. That man doesn't waste time on secretaries. What have you been telling him? Nothing that isn't true. Which means what exactly? I stood matching his stance. It means you should come to the summit tomorrow, all of you, after Marcus's party. Why would I do that? Because James is right. It will be educational. He stepped closer, using his height advantage the way he always had. If you're playing some game trying to embarrass the family or overshadow your brother's moment, I would never overshadow Marcus, I said truthfully. He's done that all by himself. What's that supposed to mean? Come tomorrow and find out. His face darkened. You've always been jealous of him, of his success, his brilliance, the way he represents everything a Morrison should be. And what am I, Dad? What does Samantha Morrison represent? Adequacy, he said brutally. You do your little job, you pay your bills, you show up to family events. That's fine. Not everyone can be exceptional, but don't mistake James Whitfield's politeness for validation. Each word was a familiar knife, but they no longer found flesh to cut. You're right. Not everyone can be exceptional. Finally, some sense. He headed for the door. You'll be at the engagement party, 6 p.m. sharp. Wear something appropriate, not one of those bargain dresses you usually choose. This is Marcus's night. Of course it is. He paused at the threshold. And Samantha. Whatever delusion James has fed you about attending the summit, forget it. That's not your world. After he left, I sat in the silence of my office, my real office in my world built with my brilliance. On my desk, James's invitation gleamed in the morning light. Inside, I knew was a handwritten note I hadn't read yet. I opened it carefully. In James's precise handwriting, Your father is a fool, but perhaps a redeemable one. The question is whether revelation will redeem or ruin him. Either way, tomorrow the world will know what he's been too blind to see. Wear that red suit from the Versace collection Diana mentioned. You look powerful in it. I laughed despite myself. The Whitfields had been playing their own game, gathering intelligence, setting the stage. They wanted front row seats to the Morrison family implosion, but more than that, they wanted to align themselves with real power. My assistant knocked. Ms. Morgan, the Journal is on line 1. They've heard rumors about tomorrow's reveal. Also, your brother Marcus left 7 messages. He sounds distressed. Tell the Journal I'll see them after my keynote. And ignore Marcus. He made his choices. Yes, ma'am. Also, should I arrange for the car service tomorrow for your transportation between venues? I considered this. Yes, but make it discreet. I want to arrive at the summit like S. Morgan should, with impact. The Bentley. Perfect. As she left, I turned to face the city through my floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere out there, my father was probably calling Marcus, warning him about James's strange behavior and my cryptic comments. Marcus was probably panicking, Charlotte was probably planning, and Emma was probably wondering if she should skip her classes to witness the explosion. Tomorrow night, I would shed Samantha Morrison like an old coat and emerge fully as S. Morgan. The question was whether my family would recognize me in my true form or whether they'd remain blind to the very end. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana Whitfield. I've arranged for photographers from the Times, the Journal, and Forbes to cover both events. They've been told to expect the story of the year. Don't disappoint us, dear. No pressure, then. I pulled up my keynote presentation one more time. The title slide read, Authentic Achievement Building Success in the Shadows. It would chronicle my journey without naming names, but anyone who knew our family would understand. More importantly, the embedded evidence of Marcus's theft would be undeniable for those who knew where to look. Tomorrow night, the Morrison family mythology would end. Whether a new truth would rise from its ashes remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: after years of being invisible, I was about to become impossible to ignore. My mother had called the family meeting for Saturday afternoon 2 days before the summit with a terseness that brooked no argument. When I arrived at the house, the atmosphere was charged with an electricity I'd rarely felt in these rooms. Emma was already there, sitting strategically where she could observe everyone. Marcus looked haggard stress, etched into features that usually projected easy confidence. My father sat in his customary chair, irritation radiating from every line of his body. My mother stood rather than sat, a power position she rarely assumed. In her hands was a manila folder that she placed deliberately on the coffee table. I've called this meeting because I'm tired, she began without preamble. Tired of the lies, the dismissals, and the willful blindness that has infected this family. Patricia, what is this about? My father demanded. We have the engagement party to prepare for Robert, for once in your life, shut up and listen. The sharp command from my typically deferential mother stunned him into silence. I've spent 32 years watching you build pedestals for one child while using the other as a footstool. I've held my tongue, kept the peace, played the supportive wife. That ends today. She opened the folder, spreading documents across the table. I recognized some of them: financial statements, wire transfers, corporate registrations. 6 months ago, I hired a private investigator, not to spy on any of you, but to understand why Samantha, despite your constant dismissals, Robert always seemed so purposeful, so directed, so quietly confident despite your attempts to diminish her. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Mom, what did you find? The truth. She pulled out a photograph of me entering the Apex Capitol building at 5 a.m., briefcase in hand. Your sister, the one you call Dim Robert, the one you mock for her little job, is S. Morgan. The silence was deafening. She's the chief investment officer of one of the most successful firms in the country. She's the anonymous investor who saved your company, Robert. She's the brilliant mind behind innovations that Marcus has been claiming as his own. That's impossible, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? My mother pulled out more documents. Bank records showing consistent deposits far exceeding any secretary's salary. Property records for a Tribeca apartment worth $4 million. Corporate filings listing Samantha Morrison as the principal officer of multiple successful ventures. Mom, I started, but she held up a hand. No, Samantha. I've been complicit in my silence. That changes now. She turned to my father. Do you know what your daughter did when you were facing bankruptcy? While you were praising Marcus for connections he didn't have, she wired $2 million of her own money to save the company you spent 30 years building. My father's face had gone pale. The Legacy Partners investment was your daughter, your not bright enough daughter, your administrative assistant daughter, the one you laughed at when she offered to help. Emma spoke for the first time. Tell him about Harvard, Mom. My mother's expression softened slightly. Emma was accepted to Harvard Business School, full scholarship. But she hasn't told you because she's afraid you'll either credit Marcus for inspiring her or find a way to diminish her achievement. That's not, my father began, then stopped. Isn't it? My mother's voice was steel. When Samantha graduated summa cum laude from Columbia, you said it was because business school had been watered down for women. When she landed her first job, you called it a diversity placement. Every achievement was luck connections or lowered standards. Never merit, never brilliance, never her. Marcus had shrunk into the couch trying to become invisible. And you, my mother rounded on him. I know about the theft. The models, the strategies, the innovations you've claimed, all stolen from your sister's computer. How do you? Because unlike your father, I pay attention. I notice when my daughter works on complex financial models late into the night, only to see them presented as your work weeks later. I see the guilt in your eyes every time your father praises your brilliance. She pulled out the final document. This is a draft of the Wall Street Journal article scheduled to publish Monday. They've uncovered everything. Samantha's identity, Marcus's plagiarism, the whole elaborate deception. My father snatched the pages, scanning rapidly. His face cycled through denial, anger, and something that might have been grief. But the real tragedy, my mother continued, isn't the lies. It's what those lies cost us. Samantha, you built an empire while letting your family believe you were a failure. That isolation, that compartmentalization, it's my fault too. I should have stood up to your father years ago. Patricia, my father said weakly, you don't understand. Marcus showed such promise. Promise. My mother laughed bitterly. Robert, open your eyes. Your son is a thief and a fraud. Your daughter is a titan of industry. You've had it exactly backward for 20 years. Mom, please, Marcus begged. I know I messed up, but nothing. You stole from your sister. Repeatedly, consciously. And worse, you let your father heap praise on you for her work while he told her she wasn't bright enough to understand real business. The room fell silent again. I watched my family grapple with truth, each processing in their own way. Emma looked vindicated. Marcus looked destroyed. My mother looked liberated. And my father looked lost. Samantha, he said finally, his voice strange. Is this all true? I met his eyes, every word. You're S. Morgan, the one everyone talks about, the one who turned down a presidential advisory position, the one the Journal calls a once-in-a-generation financial mind. I am. And you let me, all these years, you let me believe. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, Dad, what you insisted on believing despite evidence to the contrary. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The engagement party is tomorrow night. The summit is the same night. You're the keynote speaker. Yes. Everyone will know, all my business associates, my friends, the entire financial community will know that I've been blind to what was right in front of me. They will. He turned back, and for the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "That's up to you," I said. "You can skip the summit, pretend you don't know until the journal article comes out. You can attend and act surprised. Or you can attend and finally publicly acknowledge who your daughter really is." "And Marcus, what happens to him?" Marcus answered himself. "I've already submitted my resignation to Preston, effective Monday. I'll figure out what comes next. Something honest, hopefully." My mother moved to the door. "I've said what I needed to say. Robert, I'll be filing for divorce after the engagement party. I've already seen an attorney." "Patricia, wait. I've waited 32 years. I've watched you destroy one daughter's self-worth while inflating the other child's ego based on a lie. I've enabled it through my silence. No more." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Samantha, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so sorry it took me this long to say it out loud." After she left, we sat in the ruins of our family mythology. Everything was in the open now, all the carefully constructed lies scattered like debris after a storm. The engagement party. Charlotte's name came up for the first time. "She knows everything, too, doesn't she?" Marcus nodded miserably. "She's planning to break up with me publicly tomorrow night in front of everyone. And then they'll all go to the summit," my father said slowly, "to watch Samantha reveal herself as the person I said would never amount to anything." "You could change the narrative," Emma suggested. "Show up at the summit proud of Sam. Act like you knew all along but respected her privacy. Save some face." "That would be another lie," he said quietly. "Haven't we had enough of those?" I stood to leave. "I need to prepare for tomorrow. Whatever you all decide to do, I'll be at both events. First as Samantha Morrison, the invisible daughter, then as S. Morgan, the woman who built an empire while her father wasn't looking." "Samantha," my father called as I reached the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "For what exactly? For being wrong about me? Or for being so invested in being right that you couldn't see who I really was?" He had no answer. As I drove away from my childhood home, I realized that tomorrow night wouldn't just reveal my identity. It would force my entire family to confront who they really were beneath the stories they'd told themselves. The masquerade was ending for all of us. The morning of the summit dawned crisp and clear, Manhattan gleaming like a promise of revelations to come. I stood in my office at 5 a.m. watching the city wake up while reviewing my presentation one final time. Every slide was perfect, each transition designed for maximum impact. Tonight, S. Morgan would finally have a face. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since yesterday's family meeting. 17 calls from my father, all unanswered. 43 texts from various relatives who'd somehow heard rumors. 3 voicemails from Charlotte confirming her special plans for the engagement party. But the most interesting message was from the Wall Street Journal's editor-in-chief. "Ms. Morgan, we're aware of tonight's revelation. Would you consider an exclusive post-summit interview? We're particularly interested in the family dynamics behind your decision to remain anonymous." I set the phone aside. First things first. My assistant arrived early, arms full of garment bags. The red Versace as requested, plus backup options. The Bentley is confirmed for 7:30. Hair and makeup will arrive at 6. Any changes to the summit schedule? They've moved to the grand ballroom at the plaza due to demand. 1,200 confirmed attendees plus media. The Times Journal, Forbes, Fortune, Bloomberg. Everyone wants to cover this. She paused. "Your father called the office 3 times yesterday." "I'm aware." "Should I?" "No, radio silence until after tonight." She nodded and left. I turned back to my presentation, but my mind wandered to the other preparation happening across town. Marcus would be getting fitted for his engagement party suit, probably trying to project confidence he no longer felt. Charlotte would be orchestrating her revenge with the precision of a general planning an ambush. My mother would be packing ready to leave the moment the party ended. And my father, he'd be in his study surrounded by the monuments to his misjudgment, trying to figure out how to salvage his reputation. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Emma stood in the doorway looking younger than her 21 years, but with steel in her spine. "I wanted to see you before tonight," she said, "to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me that success doesn't require approval, that you can build something incredible especially when no one believes in you." I moved around the desk to hug her. "You've always had that strength, Em. You just needed to see it modeled. I'm going to tell them about Harvard tonight, at the party, before everything explodes." "Good for you." She pulled back, studying my face. "Are you ready for this? Once you walk onto that stage, everything changes." "Everything changed years ago. Tonight just makes it visible." "And Dad?" I considered the question. Dad will either evolve or calcify. Either way, it's his choice, not my responsibility. Emma left after extracting a promise that I'd save her a seat at the summit. Alone again, I made final adjustments to my presentation. One slide in particular drew my focus a graph showing Apex Capital's growth trajectory alongside timeline markers. Each marker corresponded to a family event where my father had dismissed me. The correlation was undeniable. Every rejection had fueled greater achievement. My CFO called at noon. "Boss, there's something you should know. James Whitfield just announced a major partnership proposal contingent on meeting Apex's leadership. He's essentially forcing every major player to attend the summit." Strategic of him. There's more. He's also announced that Whitfield Enterprises is severing ties with Preston Consulting, effective immediately. He cited concerns about intellectual property integrity. The dominoes were already falling and I hadn't even spoken yet. At 4 p.m., I left the office to prepare. The transformation from invisible daughter to visible CEO required more than just clothing. It required shedding 28 years of program diminishment. In my apartment, I stood before the mirror as the stylist worked. The red suit was perfection, power, and femininity in perfect balance. My hair, usually pulled back in a simple style, was crafted into something more striking. The makeup artist enhanced, rather than masked, bringing out features I'd learned to downplay around family. "You look like a CEO," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "I've always looked like one. Now I'm just not hiding it." My phone rang. Marcus. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What is it?" "I need to warn you about something." His voice was strained. "Charlotte isn't just planning to break up with me. She's hired a documentary crew. She wants the whole thing on film, my humiliation, your revelation, Dad's reaction. She's turning our family catastrophe into content." "I'm aware. Diana Whitfield mentioned it yesterday." "You're okay with this?" "Marcus, you built a career on lies. Charlotte built a relationship on fraud. Dad built his pride on delusion. Everyone chose their path. The documentary just ensures nobody can rewrite history later." "What about you? What did you build on?" I considered the question. Spite initially, then determination. Finally, genuine desire to prove that brilliance isn't gendered or conditional on parental approval. "I really am sorry, Sam, for all of it." "I know. Show that remorse by how you handle tonight. Own your mistakes publicly. Take responsibility. It's the first honest thing you'll have done in years." "Will you ever forgive me?" "Ask me in a year when you've built something real." We hung up. The stylist made final adjustments while I mentally prepared for the evening's choreography. 6 p.m. engagement party appearance, 7:15 exit, 7:45 arrival at the plaza, 8 p.m. revelation. A text from Charlotte. "Documentary crew is in place, wearing Carolina Herrera in black, mourning the death of illusions. See you at the execution." Another from Diana. "The Journal has a photographer at both venues. They're calling tonight the Morrison Reversal." Rather dramatic, don't you think? At 5:30, I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back was nobody's invisible daughter. She was S. Morgan, and she was ready to be seen. My driver texted, "Car is ready when you are, Miss Morgan." I grabbed my clutch containing both sets of business cards, Samantha Morrison and S. Morgan. After tonight, I'd only need one. The sun was setting over Manhattan as I headed to the car, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Fitting for the end of one story and the beginning of another, my phone showed 57 unread messages, but none of them mattered now. The time for messages was over. Tonight was about presence, revelation, and truth. As we drove toward Connecticut and the first act of the evening's drama, I thought about my father's words from years ago. Not everyone can be exceptional. He was right, of course. Not everyone could be exceptional. But I was. I always had been. And in approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes, he and the rest of the world would finally see it. The Bentley purred through traffic while I sat in perfect stillness, a predator conserving energy before the hunt. Somewhere ahead, my family was gathering for what they thought was a celebration. They had no idea they were actually assembling for a revolution. My driver glanced in the mirror. "Shall I wait outside the party venue, Miss Morgan?" "Yes, we'll need to leave at exactly 7:15. "Understood. And ma'am, if I may say, you look ready to conquer the world?" I smiled. "I already have. Tonight, I'm just announcing the victory." The Morrison estate glowed with warm light as I arrived at 6:10, fashionably late by family standards. Valets scrambled to park the stream of luxury cars while guests in their finest evening wear floated through the entrance. I'd deliberately taken an Uber instead of the Bentley, maintaining my cover until the last possible moment. Inside, the engagement party was in full swing. Charlotte had spared no expense, or rather she'd ensured maximum expense for what she knew would be the relationship's funeral. Ice sculptures, towers of champagne, and enough flowers to stock a botanical garden. The documentary crew she'd mentioned was discreetly positioned cameras capturing what guests believed was a celebration. Samantha. My father's voice boomed across the foyer. He looked older than he had 2 days ago, stress etching new lines around his eyes. "You're late, and what are you wearing?" I smoothed my red suit, something appropriate. That's a designer suit. That must have cost—" "Robert, leave her alone." My mother appeared resplendent in silver, her wedding rings notably absent. "She looks powerful." He started to respond, then stopped, perhaps remembering yesterday's confrontation. The man who'd always had cutting words ready seemed to have run out of ammunition. Marcus found us next, Charlotte, on his arm. My brother looked like a man attending his own execution, while Charlotte radiated the satisfied energy of an avenging angel. Her black dress was indeed perfect for a funeral. Samantha. Charlotte air-kissed me with practiced precision. "Don't you look transformed? That color suits you." "Thank you. You look ready for an ending." Her smile sharpened, or a beginning depending on perspective. The photographer Diana had mentioned appeared ostensibly capturing family moments. I wondered if he knew he was documenting the before to tonight's after. "Ladies and gentlemen," James Whitfield commanded attention from the grand staircase. "Before we toast the happy couple, I have an announcement." The room quieted. Charlotte's hand tightened on Marcus's arm. "As you know, Whitfield Enterprises values integrity above all else. It's what we look for in partners and investments, and—" he paused dramatically, "in family." Several guests murmured approval. My father stood straighter, still believing this was positive. "Which is why," James continued, "I'm delighted to announce that Whitfield Enterprises will be represented at tonight's Finance Leaders Summit, where the mysterious S. Morgan will finally be revealed." Confusion rippled through the crowd. The summit was at 8. This party was supposed to last until 10. For those interested in witnessing financial history, the plaza has reserved additional seating. I encourage anyone who values authentic achievement to attend. His eyes found mine across the room. After all, true brilliance should be celebrated wherever we find it. My father's face darkened. He understood the implication James was suggesting something at the summit would overshadow this engagement. Charlotte took this as her cue. She stepped away from Marcus, moving to join her father on the stairs. The documentary cameras tracked her movement. "Since we're making announcements," she said, her voice carrying beautifully, "I have one of my own." Marcus went rigid. This wasn't supposed to happen until later. When I agreed to marry Marcus Morrison, I believed I was joining myself to a brilliant, innovative mind, someone whose financial strategies were revolutionizing consulting. She paused, letting anticipation build. Imagine my disappointment when I discovered those strategies were stolen. Gasps echoed through the room. My father stepped forward. "Charlotte, what are you—" Every model, every innovation, every brilliant insight that built Marcus's reputation was plagiarized, stolen from someone whose genius he could never match, whose computer he hacked repeatedly, whose trust he betrayed. "This is outrageous," my father boomed. "My son would never—" "Your son is a fraud, Mr. Morrison." Charlotte's voice was ice. "And if you attended the summit tonight instead of hiding here, you'd understand just how much of a fraud." She descended the stairs with practiced grace, removing her engagement ring as she walked. At the bottom, she handed it to Marcus, who stood frozen like a statue. "The engagement is over. The wedding is canceled, and Marcus Preston knows everything. Your resignation wasn't accepted because you were already terminated. They're preparing legal action." The room erupted. Guests turned to each other in shock. Phones appeared as people texted and searched for information. The documentary crew moved closer, capturing every moment of Morrison family destruction. Diana Whitfield appeared at my elbow. "Darling, I think this is your cue to leave. The real show starts in 90 minutes. I checked my phone 7:12. Perfect timing. "Samantha, don't you dare leave!" My father's voice cut through the chaos. "Not when your brother is being slandered." "Slandered with truth?" I said calmly. "Everything Charlotte said is factual. Marcus knows it. I know it. And after tonight, everyone will know it." "You're behind this," he accused. "You've poisoned them against your own family." "No, Dad. I've simply stopped hiding while others lived my achievements." I moved toward the door. "If you want to understand, come to the summit. Or stay here in the wreckage of your illusions. Your choice." Emma intercepted me at the door. "I'm coming with you. The invitation is for financial leaders." "I'm a Morrison," she said firmly. "And I'm done being invisible too. Besides, someone from our family should be there to support you." Outside, the Bentley waited, my driver having arrived precisely on schedule. As we pulled away, I saw guests streaming out of the house, many heading for their own cars. Charlotte's bombshell combined with James's announcement had created an exodus toward the plaza. "That was brutal," Emma said quietly. "That was just the appetizer," I replied, watching Connecticut mansions give way to highway. "The main course is yet to come." My phone exploded with notifications. The financial media had caught wind of the drama at the Morrison estate. Morrison Air, exposed as fraud, competed with mystery CEO reveal imminent for trending status. A text from my CFO: "Plaza is at capacity. They're setting up screens and overflow rooms. This is bigger than we anticipated." Another from Charlotte: "Phase 1 complete. Marcus is destroyed. Your father is raging. Your mother is smiling. See you at Phase 2. We hit traffic near the city, but I'd built in buffer time. As we inched toward Manhattan, Emma reached for my hand. "Are you ready for this once you walk onto that stage?" Once I walk onto that stage, I stop being two people and become myself fully. I've been ready for years. And if Dad doesn't come, then he misses seeing his daughter change the world. At 7:45, we arrived at the plaza. The scene outside was chaos media vans, photographers, attendees, and evening wear streaming inside. Someone had leaked that tonight's revelation connected to the Morrison scandal, and the feeding frenzy had begun. My driver pulled to the private entrance. "Good luck, Ms. Morgan." Luck is for people who haven't prepared. Emma and I entered through the back, escorted by Summit security to the speaker's green room. Through the monitors, I could see the grand ballroom filling beyond capacity. Financial titans, media personalities, and my heart skipped a growing contingent from the engagement party. Diana and James Whitfield had claimed front row seats. Charlotte sat with them, her black dress a statement among the business attire. And there, looking lost and angry in the third row, sat my father. My mother was beside him, but with deliberate space between them. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. 2 minutes, Ms. Morgan, the stage manager announced. I stood smoothing my red suit one final time. Emma squeezed my hand. Go show them who you really are, she whispered. I walked toward the stage entrance, years of hiding falling away with each step. Behind me was Samantha Morrison, the invisible daughter. Ahead was S. Morgan, the woman who'd built an empire in shadows. The introduction began over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for, the reveal of the decade, the mysterious force behind Apex Capital's unprecedented success. I took a deep breath, thought of every dismissal, every rejection, every moment of being overlooked. Please welcome S. Morgan. I stepped into the light. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, recognition cameras flashing like lightning. I saw my father's face transform from confusion to shock to something unreadable. I walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who had earned every step. The room fell silent, 1,200 people waiting for me to speak. Good evening, I began, my voice carrying to every corner. My name is Samantha Morgan, though you may know me by another name. Tonight I want to tell you a story about building success in the shadows, about turning rejection into fuel, and about why sometimes the greatest achievement is proving that those who dismiss you were wrong. I clicked to my first slide, a photo of a young girl standing behind her family out of focus. This story begins with a father who said his daughter would never be the bright one. The presentation had begun. The truth finally would have its moment in the light. Standing at the podium, I let the silence stretch for a moment, watching 1,200 faces process what they were seeing. The financial media had speculated about S. Morgan for 2 years. Was she old, young American foreign connected to old money or entirely self-made? Now they had their answer, Robert Morrison's dismissed daughter. This story, I continued, is about 2 parallel lives. One lived in shadows building an empire. The other performed in spotlight praised for stolen light. My first slide showed Apex Capital's growth trajectory, but with personal annotations. Each spike in success corresponded to a family event where I'd been diminished. December 15th, 2019, Morrison family Christmas dinner. My father toasts my brother Marcus for his groundbreaking financial model at Preston Consulting. I stay silent knowing I created that model 3 weeks earlier. That night, I incorporate Apex Capital. Murmurs rippled through the audience. In the third row, my father's face had gone pale. March 10th, 2020. My father announces at the country club that his son saved Morrison Manufacturing with brilliant networking. The truth. An anonymous wire transfer of $2 million from my personal funds saved the company. The brilliant networking was my brother taking credit for my intervention. I clicked to the next slide. Documented evidence of the wire transfer, Legacy Partners Incorporation docs with my signature, the mathematical models with embedded signatures. Every innovation Marcus Morrison presented at Preston Consulting originated on my hard drive. Every strategy that built his reputation was stolen through unauthorized access to my systems. I have 47 documented instances of intellectual property theft, each meticulously tagged with digital fingerprints. The audience was riveted. Several Preston Consulting executives I recognized were frantically typing on their phones. But this isn't a story about theft, I continued. It's about transformation. Every time my father said I wasn't bright enough, I built something brighter. Every dismissal became a deposit in my motivation account, generating compound interest in the form of achievement. I showed the stats: $700 million in sustainable investments this year alone, 30% returns while maintaining ethical standards, job creation in struggling communities, innovations in green technology funding. The question you might ask is, why hide? Why let them believe I was nobody while I was becoming somebody? I found my father's eyes in the crowd, because success built in spite of disbelief is unshakable. Because when you're told you're not exceptional, proving otherwise to yourself matters more than proving it to those who refuse to see. The presentation continued through my journey late nights building algorithms while my family slept board meetings, conducted under pseudonyms, victories celebrated alone in empty offices. S. Morgan was born from Samantha Morrison's invisibility. Every achievement under that name was earned without the Morrison legacy, without family connections, without anything but merit and determination. I clicked to a slide showing side-by-side comparisons Marcus's Preston presentations and my original work dated and documented. My brother built his career on my innovations. My father built his pride on a fiction. But I built something real, a firm that challenges how wealth is created and distributed, that proves profit, and principle aren't mutually exclusive. Charlotte was recording everything on her phone, her documentary crew capturing multiple angles. Diana Whitfield looked satisfied, as if a long-held suspicion had been confirmed. "Tonight ends the masquerade," I declared. "Not just mine, but my family's. My father, Robert Morrison, believed he knew which child would carry his legacy forward. He invested everything in the one who performed masculinity and dismissiveness like him. He dismissed the one who dared to be different." I showed the final slide, Apex Capital's mission statement, surrounded by photos of the communities we'd helped, the sustainable projects we'd funded, the futures we'd changed. But here's what I learned in the shadows. Legacy isn't inherited, it's built. Excellence isn't performed, it's achieved. And being dismissed by someone whose vision is limited doesn't diminish your light. It simply means they need better glasses. I paused, letting that land. My name is Samantha Morgan. I am the founder and chief investment officer of Apex Capital. I am the woman my father said would never be bright enough. I am proof that the only validation that matters is the kind you give yourself through achievement. I stepped back from the podium. "Thank you." The silence lasted 3 seconds before the room erupted. Standing ovation from some, shocked paralysis from others. The media section was in frenzy, cameras capturing every angle of the revelation. But I only watched one face, my father's. He sat frozen, watching his entire worldview crumble in real time. My mother stood and applauded, tears streaming down her face. Emma cheered from the wings. Then movement in the crowd. Marcus had arrived, disheveled and desperate. He pushed through the standing audience, reaching the front just as the Q&A was supposed to begin. "Those were my ideas," he shouted, desperation cracking his voice. "She's lying, we collaborated." "Mr. Morrison." The moderator tried to intervene, but Marcus grabbed a microphone from the front table. "I'm Marcus Morrison, her brother. We worked together on those models. She's trying to destroy me out of jealousy." "Then explain this," I said, calmly pulling up my phone. I connected it to the presentation system, showing a video file. Security footage from our home office dated 2 years ago. The video played on the enormous screens, Marcus at my computer at 3 a.m. downloading files to a USB drive. The timestamp matched the night before his first major Preston presentation. Or this. Another video, another theft, another timestamp correlating to his supposed innovations. The room watched Marcus Morrison's complete destruction in high definition. I can explain. No. Charlotte stood up, her voice carrying clearly. "You can't, because I have 37 more videos just like those, plus keystroke logs, plus testimony from the IT specialist who helped you hack her systems." Security moved toward Marcus, but he backed away, looking wildly between me, Charlotte, and our father. "Dad, tell them. Tell them I'm the bright one, the exceptional one." But our father remained seated, silent, his face a mask of shattered certainty. Marcus fled, pushing through the crowd and disappearing into the New York night. The cameras tracked his exit, the final scene in his public humiliation. I returned to the microphone. "Are there any actual questions?" Hands shot up throughout the room. The first question came from the Wall Street Journal. "Ms. Morgan, why reveal this now?" Because truth has its own timeline. My success has established my firm's reputation unshakable. I no longer need shadows for protection. I can afford sunlight. More questions followed about strategy, about family, about the future. I answered them all with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to hide. Finally, someone asked the question I'd been expecting. What do you say to other women who've been dismissed or overlooked? I looked directly at the camera broadcasting this live to financial networks worldwide. Build anyway, succeed anyway, and when they finally see your light, make sure it's too bright to ignore. The session ended to thunderous applause. As I left the stage, Emma tackled me in a hug. You were incredible. Over her shoulder, I saw my parents. My mother approached my father, hanging back. Samantha, she said softly, I'm so proud of you, and so sorry it took this long to say it. My father stepped forward hesitantly. For the first time in my life, Robert Morrison looked small. He started, then stopped. I was wrong. 3 words. 3 words that couldn't undo 28 years, but might perhaps begin something new. Yes, I agreed. You were. Is there any chance, can we talk, really talk? I considered this. Tomorrow. Tonight I have a journal interview and a celebration with people who believed in me when you couldn't. He nodded, accepting the dismissal with grace he'd never shown when delivering them. As I walked away with Emma, Charlotte appeared with her documentary crew. That was magnificent, she said. The perfect ending to the Morrison mythology. Or the beginning of truth, I suggested. She smiled. I like that better. May I contact you about an interview? This documentary needs its hero. I agreed, then made my way through the crowd of well-wishers, business cards pressed into my hands, collaboration offers flowing like champagne. James Whitfield shook my hand with genuine respect. Diana whispered that she'd known all along. Even some of Preston's executives approached, asking about recovering the stolen models for proper attribution. Outside, the Plaza New York sparkled with promise. The Bentley waited, but I wasn't ready to leave yet. Emma, I said, wanna walk, process everything. She linked her arm through mine. Lead the way, Ms. Morgan. As we strolled through Manhattan, my phone buzzed with hundreds of messages, media requests, and partnership offers. S. Morgan was no longer mysterious, no longer hidden. She was Samantha Morrison, transformed, revealed, and finally undeniably seen. Behind us, the plaza's lights blazed against the night sky. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was facing his reckoning. Our parents were confronting their choices. The Morrison family story had shattered and scattered. But I walked forward into a future I'd built with my own hands, finally wearing my own name with pride. The bright one, after all. The Wall Street Journal interview was scheduled for 10 p.m. in a private suite at the Plaza. I'd changed from my red power suit to a more comfortable but equally commanding black ensemble. Emma waited outside while I faced a panel of 3 senior journalists, their recorders creating a small forest on the coffee table between us. Let's start with the obvious, Sarah Chen, their lead financial reporter, began. You built a $700 million firm while your family believed you were a secretary. How? Compartmentalization, I replied. I became an expert at living 2 lives. Samantha Morrison left the family home each morning to do administrative work. S. Morgan arrived at Apex Capital to move markets. But the psychological toll must have been immense. Less than you'd think. Every dismissal from my father became fuel. Every time Marcus stole my work and received praise for it, I created something bigger he couldn't steal. Spite is a powerful motivator when channeled correctly. David Martinez, their investigative journalist, pulled out a tablet. We've been investigating the intellectual property theft. Our tech consultant says the digital signatures in Marcus's presentations are incredibly sophisticated. You planned for this revelation years ago. I suspected Marcus's thefts would escalate. The signatures were insurance. I wanted undeniable proof when the time came. And that time is now because I no longer need to hide. Apex Capital's success speaks for itself. My identity was the last secret to reveal. Chen leaned forward. Your father's reaction tonight, he seemed genuinely shocked. In 28 years, he never suspected. People see what confirms their beliefs. My father believed women in business were diversity hires or administrative support at best. Every evidence of my success he rationalized away. Speaking of family, Martinez said carefully, your mother announced her divorce filing tonight. Were you aware? She told us yesterday. 32 years of enabling toxic favoritism was enough. And Marcus, there are reports he's been arrested. This was news to me, but I kept my expression neutral. I wasn't aware of any arrest. Chen checked her phone. Just came through. Preston Consulting filed criminal charges for corporate espionage and intellectual property theft. He's being held pending bail hearing. I felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and sorrow. He made his choices. No sympathy for your brother. I have sympathy for the boy who felt he had to steal to meet impossible expectations. I have none for the man who built a career on my work while watching our father dismiss me. The interview continued for another hour, covering everything from Apex's investment strategies to my plans for expansion. Finally, Chen asked the question I knew was coming. What happens to your relationship with your father now? That's up to him. He can choose to see me as I am or continue seeing what he prefers, but I'm done performing invisibility for his comfort. As the journalists packed up, Martinez lingered. Off the record, this is the story of the year, maybe the decade. Brilliant woman builds empire while family treats her as furniture. It's Shakespearean. Shakespeare usually ends badly for everyone, I reminded him. Not the comedies. And this feels more like a comedy mistaken identities revelation reconciliation, except you wrote your own ending. After they left, I found Emma in the hallway talking animatedly on her phone. She hung up when she saw me. That was Mom. Dad's still at the Plaza Bar drinking with James Whitfield. Apparently James is explaining exactly how badly Dad misjudged everything. And Marcus. In custody. Charlotte's father recommended a prosecutor who specializes in corporate crime. She's not playing around. We walked to the elevator together. In the lobby, the night's drama was still unfolding. Financial executives clustered in groups discussing the revelation. Several recognized me and nodded respectfully, a new experience. Outside, the October air was crisp with promise. My driver waited with the Bentley, but I wasn't ready for solitude yet. Want to get a drink? I asked Emma. Somewhere no one knows us. After tonight, good luck with that. Your face will be on every financial news site by morning. She was right. My phone already showed notifications from Bloomberg, Reuters, Financial Times. S. Morgan's revelation was global news. We ended up at a tiny bar in the village, the kind of place that didn't have TVs and didn't care about Wall Street drama. Over whiskey, Emma finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. Do you regret any of it? The hiding, the deception, letting them believe you were nothing. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my father's limitations forced me into shadows. But the hiding itself, no. It gave me freedom to build without interference, to fail without judgment, to succeed without attribution until I was ready. And now I'm just Samantha Morgan, publicly successful, privately exhausted, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not keeping secrets. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Charlotte. I wanted you to know, she said without preamble. The documentary will be fair to you. You're not the villain of this story. I appreciate that. Also, Marcus made bail. My father posted it on the condition he cooperates fully with authorities and enters therapy. Apparently, James had a son who crumbled under similar pressure years ago. He sees a chance for redemption. That's unexpectedly kind. My father values authenticity above all. Marcus was inauthentic, but he was also trapped by your father's expectations. There might be hope for him yet. After we hung up, Emma raised her glass. To the end of hiding. To the beginning of truth, I countered. We drank and I thought about all the beginnings tonight represented. A new relationship with whatever family remained. A public identity as S. Morgan. A future where my achievements bore my real name. But first there were practicalities. My assistant had texted a schedule for tomorrow breakfast with 3 major investors, lunch with a Senate committee on sustainable finance afternoon strategy session, with my team about going public. I should go, I told Emma. Tomorrow starts early. Tomorrow starts a new life, she corrected. One where everyone knows exactly how bright you are. As my driver took me home through quiet streets, I saw my reflection in the window no longer split between 2 identities, but finally simply myself. The masquerade was over. The real work could begin. My phone showed one final message from a number I didn't recognize. Your presentation tonight gave me courage to stop hiding my own achievements. Thank you for showing that dismissal doesn't diminish us, it reveals the limitations of those who can't see. It was signed, another invisible daughter about to become visible. I smiled and typed back, build your empire. The world is waiting to see your light. Tomorrow the financial world would dissect every moment of tonight's revelation. Articles would be written, analyses produced, opinions offered. The Morrison family drama would be reduced to lessons on leadership, authenticity, and the cost of prejudice. But tonight I was simply a woman who had finally told her truth, sitting in the back of a car driving through a city she had quietly conquered, no longer needing shadows for protection. The bright one, indeed. The next morning arrived with a weight of consequence. Every major financial publication led with the story. The Woman in the Shadows Wall Street Journal, Morrison's Blind Spot, Financial Times, the real genius of the family, Forbes. My face stared back from newsstands across Manhattan, no longer hidden, impossible to ignore. I arrived at my office to find it transformed. Flowers covered every surface. Congratulations from firms I'd worked with, anonymously apologies from those who dismissed me in person, while unknowingly doing business with S. Morgan. My favorite came from a female CEO who'd lost a bid to Apex. Now I understand why we lost. Honored to have competed with you. But between the celebrations lay harder truths. A legal summons sat on my desk. I was needed as a witness in the case against Marcus. Another envelope contained divorce papers from my mother's attorney, listing me as a witness to systematic emotional abuse and favoritism that destroyed family unity. My CFO knocked and entered. The board wants an emergency meeting. Going public is now urgent. Everyone wants a piece of Apex. Schedule it for this afternoon. Also, your father is in the lobby. Security won't let him up without your approval. I stared at the city beyond my windows. Send him up. 5 minutes later, Robert Morrison entered my office, truly seeing it for the first time. His eyes tracked across the awards, the screens showing global markets, the evidence of an empire built while he wasn't watching. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, his usual commanding presence reduced to uncertainty. Samantha. He stood awkwardly, unsure whether to sit without invitation. You can sit. He took the chair across from my desk, the power dynamic reversed from every family interaction we'd ever had. For a moment, we just looked at each other, father and daughter, seeing clearly for the first time. I've been at James Whitfield since 4 a.m., he began. He spent 3 hours explaining exactly how wrong I've been, showing me articles about you, testimonials from CEOs who've worked with S. Morgan, evidence of what you've built. I waited. 28 years, he continued, voice heavy. 28 years of having a genius daughter and treating her like she was deficient, of praising a son for stolen brilliance while dismissing the actual source. Why, I asked simply, what made Marcus worthy of investment and me worthy of dismissal? He struggled with the answer. He was what I expected excellence to look like, confident, assertive, masculine in his approach. You were quiet, thoughtful, didn't boast about achievements. I mistook humility for inability. You mistook female for inferior. Yes. The admission seemed to physically pain him. I was raised to believe certain truths about success, about who could achieve it. Every bias I inherited, I passed on. Every limitation in my vision, I imposed on you. And now I'm a man whose son is facing prison for stealing from the daughter I called dim, whose wife is leaving him for emotional cruelty, whose business was saved by the child he deemed worthless. He met my eyes. I'm a fool, Samantha. A proud, blind fool who destroyed his own family because he couldn't see past his prejudice. The words I'd waited decades to hear felt hollow now. What do you want from me, Dad? Nothing. I have no right to want anything. I came to apologize knowing it changes nothing. To tell you that I see you now too late, but completely. You're not just bright Samantha. You're brilliant, exceptional. Everything I said, Marcus, was you actually are. I know. That stopped him short. Of course you do. You've known all along. The question is what happens now. Marcus is in legal trouble. Mom's leaving you. The business community knows you backed the wrong horse. What's your plan? He laughed bitterly. James offered to buy Morrison Manufacturing. Says I've lost the judgment needed to run it effectively. He's probably right. He's right. Take the offer. And then what? Retire in disgrace? Then you figure out who Robert Morrison is when he's not propping up false narratives. Maybe you'll discover something authentic. He stood to leave, then paused. Your mother, she's staying with Emma. She'd like you to visit when you can. I will. And Marcus, his bail hearing is tomorrow. Will you speak against him? I'll speak the truth. What the court does with it is their decision. He nodded and moved toward the door, then turned back one last time. Samantha, for whatever it's worth now, I'm proud of you. Deeply, truly proud. And devastated that my pride comes too late to matter. After he left, I sat in the silence of my office, processing the conversation I'd imagined so many times. In my fantasies, his apology had felt like victory. In reality, it felt like anticlimax necessary, but insufficient, changing nothing about what had been lost. My assistant buzzed. Ms. Morgan Charlotte Whitfield is here with a film crew. Should I send them in? Give me 5 minutes, then yes. I composed myself, shifting from daughter to CEO. Charlotte arrived with a small crew, her energy focused and professional. Thank you for agreeing to this, she said, settling into the chair my father had vacated. I promise to be respectful of your time. What do you need? The truth. Your perspective on building success while being systematically dismissed. The psychological impact of hiding your achievements. The decision to reveal everything so dramatically. For the next hour, I told my story on camera. Not just the facts, but the feelings, the nights I'd cried, after family dinners where I was ignored, the mornings I'd put on my invisible daughter mask, the celebrations I'd held alone in empty offices. The hardest part, I admitted, was not the hiding itself, but what it cost me. Relationships I couldn't fully have because I was lying about who I was. Celebrations muted by secrecy. A family who never knew their daughter and sister. Do you think your father can change? People can always change. Whether he will is another question. He's lost everything he built on false premises. His pride in Marcus, his marriage, his reputation. Maybe from that destruction, something real can grow. And Marcus was a victim too, in his way, of expectations he couldn't meet honestly, of pressure that made theft seem like survival. I hope he finds a way to build something authentic. That's remarkably generous considering. Anger is exhausting. I'd rather focus on what's next. When the crew finished, Charlotte lingered. I wanted to apologize. I was so focused on exposing Marcus that I didn't consider how it would affect you. You gave me the push I needed. The revelation was inevitable, you just accelerated it. Still, family is complicated, even toxic family. Especially toxic family. She left me with a promise to send the finished documentary for approval. Alone again, I turned to the work that had always sustained me, reviewing proposals, analyzing markets, building the future. But throughout the day, between meetings and calls, I thought about transformation. Marcus would have to transform from fraud to whatever came next. My father from certainty to humility, my mother from enabler to independent woman, Emma from invisible sister to visible achiever. And me, I had to transform from the woman who built an empire in shadows to one who could lead in light. That evening, I visited my mother and Emma at Emma's apartment. We ordered Chinese food and sat on the floor like we had when Emma and I were children, before success and failure had been assigned. "I filed the papers," my mother said. 32 years ended with a signature. "How do you feel?" "Free, terrified, angry at myself for waiting so long." She picked at her lo mein. "I enabled him, you know. Let him diminish you, inflate Marcus. I chose peace over justice." "You were surviving too," Emma offered. "We all were in our ways." "No more surviving," my mother declared. "From now on, we thrive." We talked late into the night about futures now possible. Emma would attend Harvard openly, proudly. My mother would travel, maybe return to school herself. I would lead Apex into public markets, expanding our mission of profitable ethics. As I prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. "I know I failed you as a mother. Letting him treat you that way, staying silent when I should have roared. Can you forgive me?" "I forgave you years ago," I said. "I just hope you can forgive yourself." Driving home through quiet streets, I thought about forgiveness given and withheld, earned and unearned. Tomorrow would bring more consequences, the bail hearing, the board meeting, the continued media storm. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. Not the peace of resolution too much remained unresolved, but the peace of truth, told secrets, shed authentic self, finally inhabiting the life I'd built. My phone showed hundreds of messages, opportunities, partnerships, speaking engagements. The world wanted to hear from S. Morgan now that she had a face and a story. But first I had a company to take public, a family to rebuild on honest foundations, and a future to create without shadows. The masquerade was over. The real work of leadership, of healing, of building something even greater was just beginning. 6 months after the revelation changed everything, I stood in the New York Stock Exchange preparing to ring the opening bell. Apex Capital was going public at a valuation that made every financial journalist reach for superlatives. The woman they'd called not bright enough was about to helm a billion-dollar IPO. Behind me stood my transformed family. Emma power-dressed for her Harvard Business School presentation later that day, where she'd discuss authentic leadership using our story as a case study. My mother, radiant in her independence, having just returned from a month in Italy where she'd rediscovered the artist she'd been before marriage. Even Marcus was there, subdued, but present 6 months into his court-mandated therapy and community service, working as a junior analyst at a nonprofit I'd recommended building something honest for the first time. My father stood apart, slightly still, learning how to exist in a world where his assumptions had crumbled. He'd sold Morrison Manufacturing to James Whitfield, who'd retained all employees and promoted the women my father had overlooked. These days, Robert Morrison volunteered teaching financial literacy in underserved communities, discovering humility through service. As I reached for the bell, I thought about the journey from shadow to light. The financial press had dissected every angle of our story. Charlotte's documentary, The Invisible Empire, had won awards and sparked conversations about bias in business and families alike. Young women wrote to me daily, sharing their own stories of building brilliance while being dismissed. The bell rang its sound, carrying across the trading floor and beyond. Apex Capital was public S. Morgan was fully visible, and the Morrison family had found something like redemption in truth. After the ceremony, as cameras captured the moment, a young journalist asked me the question I'd been expecting. "Ms. Morgan, what would you tell other invisible daughters and sons who are building in the shadows?" I looked directly into the camera, thinking of all those who needed to hear this. "Your light doesn't depend on their vision. Build anyway, succeed anyway. And when the time comes to reveal yourself, do it on your terms. The world needs what you're creating, even if your family can't see it yet." Any regrets about hiding for so long? None. Every shadow taught me strength. Every dismissal built resilience. I became S. Morgan because Samantha Morrison was deemed insufficient. Now I'm both fully integrated, teaching others that success doesn't require permission. As the interviews concluded, my father approached hesitantly. We'd been rebuilding slowly, coffee meetings and careful conversations replacing decades of dysfunction. "I watched your presentation to the World Economic Forum last week," he said quietly. "Your sustainable investment model, it's revolutionary." "Thank you. I've been thinking about what you said, about building anyway, even when no one believes in you." He struggled with the words. "I stole that from you. The joy of shared achievement, the pride of family support. I can't give that back." "No, you can't. But maybe I can give it forward. I've started a scholarship fund for young women in finance whose families don't support their ambitions. I named it after you." I felt tears threaten not for what was lost, but for what might still be found. That's a good start. Marcus joined us, still learning to navigate a world where his facade had crumbled. "Sam, I wanted to thank you again for the recommendation to the nonprofit, for not pressing additional charges, for still being my sister when I didn't deserve it." "You're building something real now," I said. "That matters more than what you stole. The models I took, I've been studying them properly. You're brilliant in ways I never understood. I just saw success to claim not the innovation behind it." "Now you know better." "Now I do better," he corrected, "or try to." The day continued with meetings, celebrations, and strategic planning. Apex Capital's public offering had exceeded all projections. We were positioned to expand our sustainable investment model globally to prove that ethical capitalism wasn't an oxymoron, but an evolution. That evening, my team threw a party at the Rainbow Room. As I stood looking out over Manhattan, Diana Whitfield appeared at my elbow with champagne. "You've won," she said simply. "Not just the IPO or the recognition. You've rewritten the rules." "I've started rewriting them. There's more work ahead." "Isn't there always?" She studied me shrewdly. "James wants to propose a partnership. Whitfield Enterprises and Apex Capital combining old money wisdom with new money innovation. I'll consider it, but my terms, my ethics, my vision. I wouldn't expect otherwise." She raised her glass. "To the bright one, may your light illuminate paths for others." As the party swirled around me, I found a quiet moment to step onto the balcony. New York spread below, lights twinkling with promise and possibility. My phone showed messages from around the world, investors, partners, young women seeking mentorship, families reconsidering their own dynamics. Emma joined me, leaning against the railing. "So what's next? You've conquered Wall Street, transformed our family, changed how people think about success. What mountains are left?" "All of them," I said. "This was just about becoming visible. Now comes the real work, using that visibility to create change. More sustainable investments, more opportunities for dismissed brilliance, more proof that traditional power structures aren't the only path." "The Morrison sisters changing the world." "The Morgan sisters," I corrected. "I'm legally changing my name. Samantha Morgan, no hiding, no hyphens. Just me." "I like it. Maybe I'll join you. Emma Morgan has a nice ring." We stood together, sisters who'd found strength in truth, planning futures unlimited by others' expectations. Inside, our mother danced with abandon, free from decades of careful constraint. Marcus engaged earnestly with nonprofit leaders, learning to build without stealing. Even our father, humbled but not broken, seemed lighter as he discovered who he might be without the weight of false certainty. My phone buzzed with one final message of the day. From a young woman in Ohio, "I told my family today about the company I've been building. They didn't believe me until I showed them your story. Thank you for proving we don't need their belief to be real." I smiled and typed back, "You were always real. Now you're just visible too. Keep building." As the party wound down, I gathered my family, fractured but healing, transformed by truth. "I want to make a toast," I announced, raising my glass. They assembled this collection of people who'd played roles in a drama none of us had fully understood until it exploded into view. To endings that become beginnings, to families that learn to see each other, to success that doesn't require permission, And to all the invisible daughters and sons who are building empires in shadows, may you find your moment to step into the light. We drank. We embraced. We looked toward futures we were still learning to imagine. The Morrison mythology had died 6 months ago in spectacular fashion. In its place grew something smaller but more real, a family learning to value authenticity over appearance, achievement over assignment, truth over tradition. I left the party as Samantha Morgan, publicly successful, privately at peace, no longer divided between who I was expected to be and who I'd chosen to become. The integration was complete. The empire built in shadows now stood in sunlight. And somewhere in the city, in small apartments and big dreams, other invisible builders were choosing their moments, planning their reveals, gathering courage from a story that proved dismissal was just misdirected invitation to exceed all expectations. The bright one, I'd always been that. Now finally everyone could see. To those of you building in shadows, dismissed by those who should celebrate you, your time is coming. Your light doesn't need their recognition to shine. Build anyway. The world is waiting for what you're creating. What's your story? When will you step from shadow into light? Share your journey in the comments below. Like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of transformation and triumph. And share this with someone who needs to hear that their invisibility is temporary, but their brilliance is permanent. Remember, you were never not bright enough. They just needed better glasses.